ready to go. Where's our resident doctor? There he is. Hey. Ready to go? This is sidebar. I wanted to make sure that Dr. Ben was here because he's our resident physician in the house. So I'm glad to see all of you, and welcome to the Science and Technology Committee. And again, for those of you who might not have had the opportunity to see our chairman, he is in appropriations today, which is a big day for us, and so he wishes that he could be here, and he said if they finish up that he's going to try to come in maybe at the end of the meeting. But can you hear me? Okay. I could not hear myself, which that's not bad. As we do in all of our committees, and which I'm very thankful for, we stop for a moment and give thanks for all of the things that we have been blessed with. So if you just bow for a moment and then we'll begin. Our Father, we thank you for this day you have given to us and the opportunity that we might serve mankind through things that you have brought to our minds, and we've been able to develop them into wonderful techniques to meet the needs of people, your creation. And so we ask that today, that as we observe and we have a time for questions, that we always thank you for giving us that wisdom. Be in all that we do today, and we'll thank you for that. In your name we pray. Amen. Thank you. And it is a great pleasure to see you. You know, I was sharing with some, I had heart surgery last May, and to look at this on the table here is fascinating. And I'm really excited about being able to observe what is taking place at Georgia Tech and through St. Joseph and the others that are represented here today about the technology of what's happening in surgery. And I think that we're very blessed. And Mike, I know that since you're a Georgia Tech graduate, you're wanting to really get this plug in. That we have Dr. Peterson here this morning with a group of people that is going to present something that's very interesting. So, Dr. Peterson, would you come and introduce the people that you've brought with you?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank you and the members of the Science and Technology Committee for all the work that you're doing for the state of Georgia and for the support that you're providing higher education. The tech students that are here today that you'll hear from are members of the Biomedical Engineering Capstones Design course. They are working with the clinical advisor, Dr. James Fonger, who you'll have a chance to meet. He's the Executive Director of Surgery at St. Joseph's Translational Research Institute. We're honored to partner with St. Joe's and to be able to develop solutions for some of the most challenging problems that exist in medicine today. Also with us today is Professor Franklin Bost over here. He's the advisor. He's the capstone advisor, professor of the practice at Georgia Tech, and is the advisor for these students. Professor Bost is part of the Biomedical Engineering Department, which, as you may know, is a joint effort between Emory University and Georgia Tech. It's a department that was established just a little over 10 years ago and is now ranked in the top 2 or 3 in the country, a program that we're tremendously proud of. The month of February is dedicated to heart awareness and the prevention of heart disease, and trying to increase knowledge among the public about heart disease and the ways that it can be prevented. You'll be interested to know, I think, that by coincidence this morning, at the same time you're seeing this demonstration, a camera crew for a syndicated science program is covering the Biomedical Engineering Senior Design Project at Zoo Atlanta, where another team has developed a blood pressure cuff for gorillas, a rather challenging problem, a little different than this one, but challenging
Who puts that on?
And we have another group of students that are pursuing a patent on a device that's been approved for clinical trials to detect pneumonia in young people around the world. Dr. David Koo, who's a professor at Georgia Tech, was challenged by the director of virology at CDC to develop a device that would be a point-of-care device that could serve the poorest child in India. Every 15 seconds, a child in Asia dies of pneumonia. This is a device that costs less than $20 and can detect pneumonia in very, very early stages. Discoveries to many of the problems that we face around the world, many of what we refer to as grand challenges, are increasingly occurring at the interface of traditional disciplines. And that's one of the things that's really remarkable about this particular project, is it really is a partnership between a number of different institutions and a partnership between different disciplines and addressing problems that occur at the boundaries of those disciplines. With partnering, or through partnering with medical experts, with the technology that exists at Georgia Tech and the creative, innovative approach that our students can take, we're able to address some of these very, very challenging problems. St. Joe's has an international reputation in cardiovascular medicine, and when you combine their expertise with the expertise in technology that exists at Georgia Tech and the creative energy that exists through the partnership with Emory, we think that we are able to take some very creative and innovative approaches. At this time, I'd like to turn the podium over to Bruce Simmons, who's chair of the board for St. Joseph's Translational Research Institute. Bruce is retired managing director and senior credit officer for Citicorp North America and Citigroup Incorporated here in Atlanta. He's responsible for corporate finance clients in the Southeast and railroad logistics clients throughout North America. He's active professionally and very engaged in higher education through a number of activities. So with that, Mr. Simmons.
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
As President Peterson said, I'm a recovering banker, so it's a pleasure to be here.
I'm one too.
Just a little background. I'm a community volunteer. I've been volunteering at St. Joseph's for 27 years, and I recently retired as chairman of the board there of the hospital and the health system, and as a reward they asked me to be chairman of the board of St. Joseph's Translational Research Institute, which actually has been quite rewarding. It's a wonderful place. It does incredible science. It's really emerging now as a force in preclinical research in the United States. But it's important to understand in a historical context that innovation is a very important part of St. Joseph's DNA. In 1880, four Sisters of Mercy came to Atlanta from Savannah and established Atlanta's very first hospital. In 1978, that hospital moved out to North Atlanta to Pill Hill and really transformed itself into a tertiary referral adult hospital. It has become internationally known as a center of excellence for cardiology, cardiovascular surgery, orthopedics, etc. From an innovation standpoint, St. Joseph's was the first hospital in Georgia to do angioplasty. We had a doctor who created his own heart-lung machine to help his coronary bypass surgery. We were among the first to do a heart transplant. We're a world leader in coronary robotic surgery, and we're a world leader in training doctors for coronary robotic surgery. That all resulted in St. Joseph's being named a top 50 hospital in the United States by Health Grades. We're also one of 3 hospitals in the world to receive the Magnet Award for nursing 4 times in a row. So you have a sense of the excellence and the innovation at St. Joe's. 10 years ago, we decided to extend that innovation by purchasing a small lab that some of our cardiologists created and renamed it St. Joseph's Translational Research Institute. 2 years ago, we moved it down to the Technology Enterprise Park on Georgia Tech's campus. The objective to be closer to the Georgia Tech scientists and to collaborate with them. We bring a world-class, highly efficient, large animal lab to downtown Atlanta. It is one of the very few in the Southeast and the only one in Atlanta that does large mammals. We are now expanding the service lines from cardiology into orthopedics, cancer, vascular disease and angiogenesis, and we are beginning an effort on sickle cell disease. This initiative between Georgia Tech undergraduates, and I emphasize they're undergraduates, quite remarkable, not graduate students, and SJTRI highlights the power and the necessity of collaboration, which will drive our state's economy in the 21st century. No one organization has the breadth of expertise and the sufficiently deep pockets to fund this type of innovation. We are proud of the result of this effort, which will improve the delivery of health care to this community and to the world. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Jim Fonger from SJTRI.
Well, good morning, Mr. Chairman, committee members. I'm Jim Fonger. I direct the surgery program and the training program at SJTRI. I'm also a cardiac surgeon. My role in this is to be a mentor to these undergraduate students. And in September they showed up, and my job was to figure out a medically relevant and engineering relevant project that I could suggest to them and then get them pointed in the right direction to take this forward. And then, of course, as that goes forward, my job is to sort of watch over them, keep them directed, and most importantly, probably to marshal resources for them as they go down this path. Because when I talked to them initially, I said, so what would be your budget for this year-long project that you need to go along on? And they said, well, $500. So I said, that's not probably going to get you a whole long way, considering if we want to do a really medically relevant thing that's going to put a small dent in the universe. So with that, I said, clearly I've got to marshal some resources along with ideas to get this done, which we've done. Over the 4 short months, these undergraduates have done some pretty remarkable things. They've taken this through this whole development process, which they'll share the responsibilities of telling you about here in just a moment. They've done a number of animal trials at SJTRI to proof of concept and iterate their device. They've filed a patent on this device because it looks like it's going to be a very significant achievement along the way, so that's in process. They've competed in a Georgia Tech competition on new technology. They've submitted their idea to an international minimally invasive cardiac surgical meeting, and they're waiting to hear whether they're on that docket in June. And looks like they may have a corporate strategic partner to take this thing forward in the scope company that they're going to show you here in just a moment to take this forward. So if you think about all of that happening over 4 months, while they're also busy college students with, as you well remember, some personal and social responsibilities in college as well, I think this has been pretty remarkable. And the other piece to understand is that in all the meetings I call them over to and all the tasks I put them to in that process, they've all showed up. Not 2 of them, not 3 of them, but for almost all the meetings, all 4 of them, so that they've truly been not only productive, but they've been a team in doing this thing. And I think that we're going to emphasize that here again this morning, as we'll hear from all of the 4 team members with their respective parts of this project. So it's nice to also hear that we can measure the blood pressure in gorillas. That's important too. But I think this morning we're going to focus on the heart. And I can tell you that at SJTRI we've had two groups in the last 7 days. One group in the electrophysiology area and one group in the therapy for injecting in the heart, which have validated what they're about to tell you about, and the fact that there will be some real medical and commercial interest in this once they get this successfully down the road. So without further ado, I think we'll hear from these fellas, and their names are going to be up on the board, and they'll introduce themselves as they take their sections. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I would like to begin by thanking all of you for hosting us today. My name is Tahir Haq, and I'm here to present the background information and problems CardioScout aims to address. So as many of you know, cardiovascular disease is a leading health issue in the United States. Approximately 40% of Americans die from it annually. Among the various subpopulations, heart failure is the largest and most expensive subset of heart disease. To give you a better idea, the single diagnosis of heart failure costs 37 cents per Medicare dollar spent. And there's approximately 750,000 new cases of heart failure diagnosed every year. Researchers are now developing new regenerative therapies with genes, proteins, and cells to administer to a failing heart. With our project, we elected to design a device which would facilitate the administration of such drugs. Currently, as you can see on the slides, there are two methods of accessing the heart. On the left, there's a more traditional approach which requires open heart surgery. This involves a median sternotomy, which is extremely invasive. On the right, there's a minimally invasive surgery, more specifically the subxiphoid access, which involves a 2-centimeter incision below the chest bone. And on the bottom right corner, you can see an example of a device that's been inserted into the heart via the subxiphoid approach. There are 4 key differences between the two procedures. For open heart surgery, a large incision is required. The patients are placed on a cardiopulmonary bypass machine, and the heart has to be stopped before a procedure can be performed. The one major advantage to this is that multiple procedures can be performed when the heart is opened. On the contrary, minimally invasive surgery requires a very small incision, and no cardiopulmonary bypass is required. The patient's procedure can be performed on a beating heart, but the only drawback to this is that one procedure can be performed at a time. And this is important because our device uses the minimally invasive approach because it provides better outcomes for the patients, since it involves less discomfort, a shorter hospital stay, and less use of blood products. Now, our device has a variety of applications in minimally invasive surgery. There are 2 primary applications and multiple secondary applications. The first and primary application of this device would be used to treat congestive heart failure. Congestive heart failure is when fluid buildup occurs in the heart and the lungs due to blocked coronaries, a faulty heart valve, or problems in the heart muscle. Our device could administer certain therapies which would restore the heart function and treat the congestive heart failure. Next, it could be used to detect arrhythmias and ablate them. So arrhythmias are where there are abnormal rhythms in the heart. So our device could go in and travel on the surface of the heart and detect the point of origination, and then use radio frequency and zap it at that point to ablate the arrhythmia. Next, there are multiple secondary applications, including the placement of pacemaker leads, diagnosing postoperative bleeding, and atrial appendage closure. So pacemaker leads are crucial, especially when it comes to placement for patients with heart problems. Our device could go in and determine the ideal location where activation is optimal and place the pacemaker lead. And traditionally, a thoracotomy is required for this approach, but our device would remove the need for a thoracotomy. After patients have surgery, there is a chance for excessive bleeding. So our device can be used to diagnose postoperative bleeding by going and finding the source of the bleeding and then possibly determining if further intervention or stitching is needed to treat that. And finally, it can be used to close the atrial appendage. Currently, users such as surgeons use fluoroscopy to guide their way to close the atrial appendage. Our device would provide the visualization necessary to, better the procedure.
Good morning. My name is Nick Patel, and I'm going to be talking about the design process that we went through for our device, the CardioScout. And you can see here the picture on the left is a picture of one of our early iterations of the device, and the picture on the right is one of our most recent prototypes. And you can see some of the changes that came about through our design process, such as the handle, and more extensively the head of the device, which I'll be talking about in more detail. One of the key features of our device is that it works with a standard bronchoscope. So there's actually 2 parts to our solution. The first is the device that we created, the CardioScout, and the second is a commercially available bronchoscope. And a bronchoscope is a flexible scope that's placed down the airway of a patient. And it's flexible, so it's maneuverable and steerable. It has a light source, and it has a camera, so it provides direct visualization for the user. And a bronchoscope also has a working channel, so that instruments such as injections or other therapies can be introduced from the bronchoscope and be taken directly to the tip. And we'll show you now how the bronchoscope actually fits with our CardioScout device. So the shaft of the bronchoscope slides down, and the curved portion of our device guides the bronchoscope tip right up to the head of the device. And so the camera will show directly what is right in front of the head of the device, and we'll be going into more detail throughout the presentation. And the curved shaft design, as well as the handle, was something we came up with pretty early on in the design process. And we found that this curved shape was really effective to reach the heart from the subxiphoid incision that Tahir talked about, which is below the sternum. And we also found that having a handle, which the user could grip onto, made it really easy for the surgeon to steer and maneuver the device to reach the top, bottom, and side surfaces of the heart. And so as I talked about, we came up with the curved shaft and handle design pretty early on, but the head of the device took a lot more iterations and a lot more prototyping and testing. And each of these pictures is actually a different head design, which fits on the end of the curved shaft, as I talked about, and this is what rides on the surface of the heart. And we tested each of these different designs in a tabletop model here, as well as in pig models. And by doing this, we were able to see which features were effective and which weren't, and it helped us better refine our design. And during each of the testing, we based our decisions on a few critical criteria for our device to have. The first was that it had to be minimally invasive, because that is the goal of our device. And so the device head had to be limited to no more than a few centimeters in size. And that's because it has to slide through a small incision in the chest as well as in the pericardium to reach the heart. The heart is surrounded by a sac called the pericardium, and to work on the surface of the heart, you need to create a space by lifting the pericardium off of the surface of the heart. And in each of these designs, you can see that there's a wedge shape on the front of the head. And we found that this wedge shape was really effective to pry the pericardium and lift it off the surface of the heart and create a sort of tent underneath so that you had a good working space. But we also found that there was a trade-off, because you would think the bigger the head, the more space you have. But the larger head also imparts more pressure on the pericardium and the heart, which can cause permanent damage. So there is that balance between optimal size and optimal space creating ability. Our device is a minimally invasive device, and it's meant to work on the beating heart. And working on the beating heart causes a huge issue of stability, because the heart is beating and moving around significantly. And we found that the larger head, the more broad surfaces, was able to provide more stability. But again, there was a trade-off between having the bulkier head, which reduces the maneuverability of the device because it can't reach all surfaces of the heart, but providing a decent amount of stability. And so we had to have the trade-off between that optimal size. As I talked about, the visualization for our device came from the bronchoscope. And in our design, we based it off of an Olympus bronchoscope, which is fully autoclavable, so it's able to be sterilized to levels acceptable in the thoracic cavity. And our Olympus bronchoscope has an HD camera, so it provides great visualization for the user. And a standard bronchoscope has about 120-degree field of vision. The larger head design would create a larger tent, as I talked about, which would, in turn, be able to provide a better field of vision. But we found that the bulkier heads also hindered the camera, and so you wouldn't be able to see as much. So again, there was the balance between having the bigger head, which provided the bigger tent, but did not hinder the field of vision for the user. And all of these other criteria kind of lead up to this last criteria, which is being able to accurately deploy the treatment, or such as an injection or placing pacement leads like Tahir talked about. And so having an ideal sized and shaped head, which provided a good amount of stability, but also allowed the user to see different anatomical structures, such as where the blood vessels were, allowed them to know exactly where they were, where the site of injection or treatment was. And it also allowed them to identify which structures to avoid, like coronary arteries, because if you inject into a coronary artery, it can cause significant damage. And so ultimately, we were able to find an ideal shape through all of this testing, which provided a good amount of balance between all of these different criteria, which Kevin will talk about.
Hello, my name is Kevin Rago, and I'm going to be talking about our final proposed design and plus further testing. So this is the Cardio Scout. Those are some final renderings of the last model. Based on the heart model tabletop that you see here, we performed some tests and eliminated certain design concepts based on them. We chose this final design because it was small and simple, allowing added mobility underneath the pericardium. The handle allows for reach to the front and side of the heart. The bridge of the head, which you can see a closer shot of the head there, pushes the pericardium out of the way gently, and also adds stability underneath the pericardium. Also, there's an open loop, which increases the field of vision, so you can look up and down onto the heart. And finally, there's a threaded head, which allows you to either put the head, screw it on right side up or upside down if you want to reach the bottom of the heart. And so we needed to do further testing. We can't just work on the fake heart the entire time. So we came up with a porcine model. So we use a large pig, we put it to sleep, and we make the subxiphoid incision into the pig. And there's a picture of us using the device in a pig. The actual incision is larger than we would expect to do in a regular procedure, but for the purposes of the testing, we left it that way. The device was also manufactured completely out of aluminum to be sterilizable, and it also added support to the device so it didn't, say, break off in the heart or something like that. And that's the current prototype you see now. And now we're going to show you a video. As it says there, viewer discretion is advised, of an actual test. So this you can see is a subxiphoid incision in a pig. Right there where the finger was pointing is a bit of cartilage that needs to be removed before the procedure. Here you can actually see the pericardial window. So there's the heart beating, and that's the incision in the pericardium. Here's another shot. You can see how the heart beats in the pericardial sac. And that is the view we would be getting through our device. Here is a view not through our device. So we're on the side view, viewing our device from the outside, and you can see it's gentle on the heart and also provides stability. And once again, the heart is beating, which we could not ever establish in this model. And now one of the most important parts is identifying the target. And here you can see the direct visualization viewing down onto the heart. What we're looking for is places without coronaries or arteries or just things that might bleed and lead to more bleeding. Here is the an injection. So once we find our spot, we situate ourselves and go in for the injection. And there you can see, and you'll see in a second a little bit of bleeding. But that's expected, and it stops very quickly. And now you will see another injection. This is on a completely different spot of the heart right here. So this shows we can reach many areas and about the same thing. And this one has a little less bleeding, so it's so in order to visualize this, we will do a demonstration for you in a second. The needle actually feeds through the working channel of the bronchoscope. This is what we're looking to not hit. If you hit this, there will be problems and much bleeding. And this is really the importance of our device, is locating and viewing these things. Also, there's a narrowband filter in the actual scope, which allows arteries to be pinpointed more accurately. And finally, there's more landmarks on the heart, and there's importance in viewing multiple areas of the heart. And so now I'll turn it over to Chris, who will show you a demonstration on our heart model, tabletop model.
Hi, I'm Chris Jorgensen. I'm going to be showing you how we actually tested our device in order to establish which final design we use. So in this box here, we have a model human heart with a simulated pericardium. This is actually the type of heart that surgeons use when they are practicing subxiphoid surgery. So what we have here is a hole, which is a model subxiphoid incision. And it allows us to test our device because there's a small slit in the pericardium right here into which our device goes in. And we have placed 2 crosshair staple marks on the heart to show how accurate we can drive around and visualize research of the heart. The bronchoscope that we are going to be using right here, this is not our final model. This is in fact just a model that we use for testing. So it does not have the HD screen or is it auto-traceable, but it does work fairly well for testing. As you can see on the screen right there, that is a visualization of exactly what the bronchoscope sees.
If any of the committee would like to get a little closer to see. Sure. I'm fascinated.
Oh, by the way, did this baby have cholesterol problems?
All right, so what we've got right here is the light source, which the surgeon needs to see because there's obviously not any light inside the body. So what we're going to do is close this and simulate the thoracic cavity in which the surgeon would be operating. So this is very much like the Forty model, which we did previously, except that it's not a beating heart. So what the surgeon would do would be to insert this device all the way in and grab onto this handle and articulate the head up and down with the nut. So normally we would retract this slightly to allow the wedge shape of our head to lift up to the surface of the pericardium, and before we would articulate the bronchoscope out farther so that we could bend down and look at the heart. So, I will just do Alright, so right there is the slit in which we're going into. That's the pericardium surface. As you can see, it's sliding up over the device. And so I slide the bronchoscope forward, and I can see all around. And
Able to put that up on the small screen here too?
oh, there's the drawing there.
You can see it on that big screen there. Okay, thank you.
Alright, so this is our first target that we're going to be visualizing. And what Kevin is going to do is slide our simulated needle into the working channel. And we're going to deliver a simulated injection. So if you look on our computer screen here, you're able to deliver an injection with quite a bit of accuracy. Right? And now we're going to go find our second target. I believe is that's good. Yeah. And so this could be potentially a very short procedure, which could deliver regenerative therapy to your heart and save thousands or even millions of lives every day. So now we have the first step.
We have so many people, especially when they later on in life, that have degenerative
this, I don't know if it's been demonstration or not, how is it that you kind of regenerate or help to overcome some of those disastrous conditions with using this type, I guess, going to the place, the locations in the park that may be diseased? Is that what?
Yeah.
And I guess the second part of that is that using this device, you pretty much eliminated the need to go in and do invasive surgery. I'm speaking of valve surgery, those types of things that have to be replaced. How is this pretty much revolutionized the way you've done heart surgery?
Not so much for the actually invasive surgery. This is mainly a method of delivering regenerative therapies. So if you do need invasive surgery, you're going to be getting the regenerative therapies anyway. But if you do not need that huge incision and bone breaking on your sternum, then you would want to use this device instead.
So this device could be used for any procedure that could be done on the surface of the heart and utilize the rotation or the bronchoscope. Other procedures such as bypasses would require the traditional. If you remember the opportunities slide, those are mostly the things you can do with it, and it doesn't really go into those bigger procedures.
So practical application is what we're looking for is eventually this thought that we have good muscle tissue surrounding the area that are not helping regenerate that particular tissue to improve heart rate and keep it out of
Yeah.
increase their pump function, whether they're 25% pumped up to 30, 35%. So this device delivers both of those chemicals to that area to help that heart movement.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Is that being done now? And I'm not aware of that being done in practical application.
It's being done in an open setting right now because they haven't had a device like this. But the tragedy there is always that we don't need to do much except inject. But the problem is we can't inject on fluoroscopy easily because we don't know where the blood vessels are. So you saw that big juicy blood vessel in the video, and that's clearly something that we don't want to accidentally inject into. So their device has allowed us to accurately and safely visualize the surface of the heart, and as you see quite accurately on the model and also on the live animal, get to these locations and know where you're injecting. And then the other primary application was the arrhythmia application, because some people have a bad heart rhythm can potentially cause them ventricular tachycardia or even fibrillation on the heart. And it turns out that if you can get to the surface of the heart, you can drive around with an electrode and figure out where the spot is where the bad rhythm is coming from, and then flip a switch and zap that spot in the heart and get rid of that rhythm. But again, you have to be able to drive around accurately on the surface of the heart, and ideally, like the students have shown today, there are now going to be ways that you can do this minimally invasively.
That's going to require a lot of coordination between the electrophysiologist, plastic surgeon, and the process like this. From a practical standpoint, because heart rate is the number one mission for hospital patients. This can improve somebody's rectal by 5 to 10% with some medicine. It's tremendous cost saving and quality of life success.
And what kind of additional training would a surgeon need to use this particular device?
I think this is simply a little half-day course that they would come. When we do these half-day courses of training at SJTRI all the time, we do them on a weekly basis with orthopedic surgeons, cardiac surgeons, showing them new technologies that weren't available when they trained. So we're in the business of sort of postgraduate training on a regular basis at SJTRI. I see this as just another typical training course that they might come to learn this new therapy over the course of half a day. And it's really pretty simple. First of all cardiothoracic surgeons are comfortable using a bronchoscope to go down the bronchus and look in the lung. That's all part of your training when you do your residency. So all we're really adding is the new silver device that these students have invented here, and adding that. And I think probably it'll be 2 people when you're all done, because one person's going to have to hold the silver device. The other one is going to have to work the bronchoscope and the channel, and that's how we've been doing it in the lab when we've been testing it. We found that it's it's a two-person thing, but that's no big deal. I mean, we do lots of two-person therapies along the way. But as was pointed out here, heart failure consumes 37 cents out of every Medicare dollar. Think about that. It's the largest, most expensive diagnosis in the DRG system, and most of that is not heart transplantation or ventricular assist devices, which is what we see in the 6 o'clock news all the time. Most of that 37 cents is patients at home in class 3 heart failure taking 4 or 5 medications who get short of breath 3 or 4 times a year and bounce into their local emergency room, get admitted for a week or two, get adjusted on their medications and go home, only to have it happen again and again and again. And the reason is because they're teetering on that threshold of being barely compensated at home on 3 or 4 medications. So as was pointed out, if we can add 5 or 10% to the ejection fraction of these people sitting at home with a therapy, a biologic or a drug or something that we can inject into some of the muscle and recover that extra 5 or 10% of ventricular function will make the difference between them bouncing in and out of hospital and costing all of us $50,000 in admission and not bouncing in and out of hospital to do that. So that's why this is so exciting.
What is the time schedule that we're talking about before this is actually in practice?
Well, I mean, luckily this is not an implant, and therefore it's not a life-sustaining device, so that it falls under a lesser category with the regulatory threshold under the FDA. So I think that we've got a much quicker and clearer path to regulatory. If we find the right strategic partner this year, I think that we could be commercialized within a couple of years.
Other applications of this device, I know basically you can put it in the heart. There's been some study or thought of further research as it pertains to this type of treatment for kidney or other parts of the body. There's been some discussion of how this type of technology can be used in other treatments.
Well, I mean, regenerative medicine crosses all those thresholds for liver, kidney, etc. But the techniques for that are different. I mean, this has a unique issue where the organ is moving and then has all these targets on the front of the heart that you don't want to hit along the way. So that's the specific problem we're trying to solve. But regenerative medicine is truly dealing with all the organ systems. And the progress in regenerative medicine has been nothing short of remarkable. And people, you don't necessarily come in contact with that in your daily news feed. You don't realize that 6 months ago, Craig Ventnor, the one who designed it, who first sequenced the human genome, 6 months ago took chemicals off a laboratory bench and made an organism which actually lives and reproduces from chemicals on a bench. I mean, these advances are earth-shattering, really, and so this device here will enable one of those areas of therapy, but there are areas of therapy in liver failure, kidney failure, etc. that are also going to be very significant.
So you spent a little bit more than $500 on this.
Well, that was my job, to find the resources, enable them, and not talk about them.
So who gets there's a patent? Is that divided up? And is that divided equally among people?
Yeah.
So we're going down the road together. But like Dr. Peterson pointed out, there's been a couple of these patents generated out of the DME program from various ideas. I think that's really exciting.
I think it's a perfect example of engineering in practice. If you're taking a novel design, it's not that it costs that much to make, but something with your mind come up with a solution for engineering, creativity, is going to save a ton of money for a lot of people. So I think it's a perfect example. I'm glad you wanted to show it. Hopefully many people can see the kind of stuff we're doing here in Georgia Tech and Georgia through this kind of technology. Very, very nice.
Probably the most impressive, or I guess maybe sobering, when you introduced these four gentlemen here, you said they were undergraduates. And I thought, my goodness, what are they going to do when they finish, all of your education and your specialized training? We're going to be reading about you in some medical journal.
Why don't you guys give your hometown so they know where you're from?
I'm from Beaufort, Georgia.
Okay. I'm from Murfreesboro. Okay.
From Atlanta, Georgia.
I'm from Marion.
rehearsal last night in preparation for this. Two of them actually left to do an all-evening lab at Georgia Tech. So their work never finishes.
Well, for one, I think this is fascinating, and it's exciting that this is happening here in Georgia. And from our committee, and our chairman, really is talking about maybe you could look at this and save the system. But we're excited about, first of all, we're excited about you and the students at Georgia Tech and the contributions of what you've made and the products that come out of that, being one of those. I mean, he's an example, I guess, he's an example. You have been operating when you want to.
My family are doctors, not me.
But, we're proud of you and the students there at Georgia Tech. We are absolutely thrilled that Georgia Tech is taking the leading role, not following some other institution, but taking the leading role in the world and looking at ways that we can live better. And I commend you and wish you nothing but the best. By the way, you were probably able to maneuver through the snow, were you not? Hard to say, you're used to it. Well, listen, thank you, and we want to get a kind of a mass picture after all this is over. And Dr. Fisher, would you like to close with anything?
Just thank you for the opportunity to bring these young men and highlight their work and highlight some of the partnerships we have with other institutions. There's a lot of this type of work going on around Atlanta because of the tremendous institutions that are here, St. Joe's, Emory, the Medical College, Health Sciences. And just these partnerships are what are going to help us be successful in the future. With that, in addition to these wonderful, bright minds that we're able to attract here. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
And I'd just like to add that St. Joe's Translational Research Institute is about 10 minutes from here, and Dr. Peterson, myself, and Bruce Simmons would be happy to arrange a tour for any of you people who are interested in coming through. It takes about an hour to walk through and see all the things we do. This is where the video was created, where the work was done, and the collaboration with Georgia Tech, which is right across the street. So we're right across from Georgia Tech, easy to get to, and we'd be happy to host anyone who wants to come down.
Our chairman has talked about that, and we have to do that during the session. All right. And your professor. You're doing all the work. We do have 34 additional teams.